everybody. I wasn't expecting all that feedback. Is that correct? Is it? Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Cabinet meeting of Rushcliffe Borough Council. I'd like to remind everyone that the Cabinet meeting is being live streamed on YouTube, and a recording of the meeting will be available on the Council's YouTube channel afterwards. In addition, the openness of Local Government Bodies Regulations 2014, other people may film, record, post on social media or blog from this meeting, and the use of such images and recordings is outside of the control of the Council. So, first item on the agenda is apologies for absence. I think we're all here, so apologies. Item 2, declarations of interest. Do we have any declarations from anybody? No. Minutes of the meeting held on the 13th of May. Can I assign those as true and correct records? Everybody in favour? Thank you. Item 4, citizens' questions. I understand there are no questions. Therefore, we move straight to item 5, the opposition group leaders' questions, and invite Councillor Walker to put your question, please.
Thank you. Good evening. The New Homes Bonus, brought in by the coalition government in 2011 and used to incentivise local authorities in England to increase the building of homes in their area, this disproportionately went to already wealthy authorities such as ours. How will the imminent loss of New Homes Bonus impact this council?
Thank you. And Councillor Verney, would you respond, please?
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Councillor Walker, for your question. I think you've covered it in the question, but I just wanted to start by briefly clarifying, as you've stated, the New Homes Bonus, as you say, is an incentive to encourage local authorities to approve and support housing development by encouraging authorities to build more homes and net increases in housing stock, supporting economic growth as housing development brings jobs, infrastructure and community investment, and obviously promoting long-term planning by aligning with government goals of addressing the national housing shortage. So it goes without saying, I think it's a good tool. Clearly, I'm pleased to note that, and I'm sure you would agree here, that as a forward-looking and responsible authority, we've done all of the above. Specifically in relation to your question, firstly, I'll dispute the initial assertion in the question regarding already wealthy authorities such as ours. As I've stated, we're a well-run authority and have made sensible operational and financial decisions which have ensured we continue to deliver excellent services for our residents and enabling growth and, crucially, balancing our books. Of course, this is against the background over a number of years of not receiving significant or comparable levels of external funding running into tens of millions, which other authorities have received, such as via the towns or levelling up funds, which we haven't. So therefore, such rhetoric must be corrected. And it's important residents understand and appreciate the ongoing financial challenges this council faces, that such messages are clear, and also when liaising with central government, particularly with the likely implications of both fair funding and business rates reset changes and what that will mean for this council. Furthermore, in terms of wealthy boroughs, I mean, the number one lower tier authority in terms of value for New Homes Bonus in 25-26 was actually Preston, with an amount of 2.136 million which they received. So all types of authorities in all areas, specifically those committed to economic growth, have generated New Homes Bonuses, as we have, not simply wealthy authorities, however you choose to define those. The simple answer to the question is that we've prudently set our medium-term financial strategy and assumed there would be no New Homes Bonus from 26-27, and I'd refer you to para 3.10, table 10 of the strategy. But we are indeed potentially losing a significant income stream in 25-26, and it will be 1.478 million. As finance portfolio holder and cabinet, we support New Homes Bonuses and continuing as we want economic growth, and therefore we should be appropriately rewarded, incentivised, and the impact of economic growth supported with funding such as the New Homes Bonus. And we'll make this point in our response to the fair funding when we have an opportunity. It is the New Homes bonus which has actually helped fund these magnificent offices and the new leisure centres that we currently have. And that such funding is necessary even for the longer term with the impending LGR, as capital resources will continue to diminish. Capital projects will require further funding and hopefully not borrowing. In case you need reminding, in our current state, we remain debt-free, of course. So in summary, Councillor Walker, although yes, it is a significant impact, we have mitigated against the loss of the bonus in our medium-term financial strategy, demonstrating once again our responsible and diligent approach in managing our finances, particularly with the volatility of the current government's decision-making. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Verdi. Councillor Walker, do you have a supplementary?
No, because Mike just kind of answered it actually in your question, in your response. But I was going to just kind of make the point of, you know, what are we doing to make sure that we're insulating our residents for what's coming down the tracks, as what was mentioned in peer review.
Well, I think I've already answered that. Councillor Walker, in terms of our medium-term financial strategy, which is a 5-year view. We were anticipating this, we've planned for it, we've mitigated, we know there will be an impact, and I'll cover later on in the end of financial year report for last year. We've actually created in-year efficiencies which will further help us bat away some of the impact of losing that Homes bonus. So I think the answer is, as I've already stated, it will be an impact, but prudently we've mitigated for it. We are planning to address it as we move forwards.
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you, Councillor Walker. Right, let's move to item 6, which is the financial outturn report, and I'll turn back to Councillor Verdi, please, to present the report.
Thank you, Chairman, and this might shed further light on what I've just said in answering Councillor Walker's question. So this is the final report for the 24-25 year. The report's been to the most recent corporate overview group, and there were no significant issues raised. Whilst it remains positive, and I'll cover some of the detail in a moment, challenges to our public finances means it is imperative that we continue to drive improvement and efficiency, and notwithstanding the impending challenges, of course, that lie ahead in relation to the government's financial reforms and local government organisation. I'll cover therefore our revenue and capital budget positions, as well as the reserves and special expenses. And just really to remind Cabinet that the position I'm reporting on this evening, of course, is a cumulative end of year update, building on the last 3 that I've already presented to Cabinet. So with regards to our revenue streams, I'm pleased that the final outturn is projecting a net revenue efficiency of 2.407 million, which is detailed at Appendix A, pages 18 to 19, with a summary of the main variances at Table 2, which is on page 9. This is a cumulative picture, as mentioned, and one I have commented upon in my previous update, so I'm not going to go into the details of each of those variances, but I may make reference to some of the high-level ones. Page 4.5 and Table 2 details some of these main variances, and primarily the adverse ones arise from planning appeals and reduced fee income, the rent increases from supported housing providers impacting housing benefits, and the cost of maintaining and replacing our fleet and tankers as we replace our fleet over time. However, counterbalancing some of these, I'm pleased that we've several areas which have helped to counterbalance and really bat away some of the unplanned variances, and these include efficiencies, for example, arising from investment income, some 1.1 million in our treasury activities, and unallocated contingency. Several leisure and depot cost savings also, such as diesel, and savings on leisure and depot contracts, where we've managed to get some more efficiencies as well. We've also had some additional grant funding and the business rate pool expected surplus, business rates pool expected surplus as well. I would like to bring to Cabinet's attention also one technical adjustment highlighted at paragraph 4.6. This is where we've removed lease payments, which are now charged to the balance sheet. And the reason we've done this is that it accounting practice or new accounting practices introduced in 24-25. This has resulted in a 452k favourable impact on our revenues. The report, of course, highlights specific challenges that face the council and how the council will fund these. And I'll refer you to paragraph 4.8 to 4.10, which focus on, for example, carbon reduction, the local government reorganisation activities, and also the impending simpler recycling areas, which are going to require further capital funding. All are significant and require reserves to fund such activities in order to protect the council and ensure it is in the best possible place to meet these challenges head on. Paragraph 4.11 shows and illustrates the council, how the council has also met its EU transformation, which is slightly better than it. In terms of reserves, Appendix B, pages 21 to 23, highlights the overall movement in usable reserves, and that's increased to 24.28 million from 20.9 million. And paragraph 4.3 details where the reserves are going to be used and what they're required for. It is important to note, though, that there remain severe service pressures carried forward. Reserves are being committed. Appendix D, pages 33 to 34, covers this in terms of the 2.96 million that will be forward. So, in summary, therefore, the favourable projected position does enable the council to protect itself from risks that materialise in what remains a challenging financial environment, and to carry forward balances or replenish and create reserves for alternative opportunities, such as LGR that I referred to. And many of the carry forwards have been reported on previously, as I said earlier on. Moving on to the capital side, paragraphs 4.6 and table 3 on page 13 highlights, and Appendix C, pages 24 to 31, the overall positions in terms of the capital programme. But in summary, we had 12.154 million in the capital programme for this year, or rather the previous year, and approximately 58% of the budget, i.e. 7.04 million, was spent, which relieves 4.308 million of an underspend, and that isn't going to be just parked and not used. It is being requested to carry forward, obviously due to project rephasing commitments to deliver the schemes in 25 and 26, and these are detailed in Appendix F, page 35. Pages 13 to 14 detail the main reasons for the budget efficiencies. Again, I've reported on many of these in my previous report. Finally, special expenses, Appendix D on page 32 and paragraph 4.17 shows a projected overspend on the special expenses budget of approximately £50,000. Now, this is mainly due to a shortfall of income expected from venue hires, for example, Gresham at Sir Julian Khan, which is undergoing refurbishment. So despite that, I'm confident that our investment will eventually reap benefits and pay off. The income levels will rise in due course. And the West Bridgford Special Expenses Group will, of course, continue to monitor the expense budget to ensure that West Bridgford Fund deficit is recovered. Finally, Chairman, I would like to thank, in particular, the finance team, Peter Linfield, Sarah, and all of the team, and indeed councillors who've been involved in ensuring and supporting the process around our finances, and the fact that they remain positive. In addition, to share with Cabinet, I'm also pleased to report that we've again met our statutory deadlines to produce the end of year financial statements. Good solid finances are, of course, and accurate accounts are, of course, the bedrock of any strong performing organisation, which I consider Rushcliffe is, and indeed the envy of many. So we won't obviously be complacent, let's not rest on our laurels. We'll continue our approach, our diligent decision making, our prudent approach, despite the earlier challenges that I've referred to in terms of LGR, simpler recycling and so on. But we'll keep being forward thinking, innovative, and keep ahead of the curve. With that, Chairman, I would like to recommend that Cabinet approve the recommendations contained within section 2, bullets A to D. Happy to read those out, but happy to read.
We can take them as read, Councillor.
Given we've all.
Thank you very much indeed. Second, Councillor Wheeler.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Happy to second. Obviously, Councillor Verdi has gone through a lot of details, so we'd be glad to know. I won't repeat all that. I just want to, I think, talk about, if you look at the report itself, it's showing the culture of this council in terms of every department is playing their part in looking for efficiencies, looking to generate income, and it's a complete team effort across every department from every level. And I think that shows the council's done, and we never rest our laurels. As Councillor Verdi said, we're in a challenging financial environment. We already saw the last budget review in terms of this council got less money than it needed in terms of the inflation and the growth in wages. So compared to some other councils who have been poorly run in the past, getting rewarded for failure. So let's hope the government in future recognise the fantastic work this council does and fund us correctly, so we can actually keep doing the fantastic work we do in terms of the, as you can tell from the report, the amount of infrastructure we put in, the amount of investment we put in across the borough, which we want to continue doing, which we could be at risk of not being able to do if the government doesn't fund us correctly and also fairly, not just not penalise us for actually doing a good job. So happy to second, Chairman.
Thank you very much indeed. Any comments or questions from anybody? So it certainly seems pretty comprehensive to me. So it just shows, as Councillor Verdi very much emphasised, the good financial management that's undertaken in this council. So I'll echo thanks that you've already given to the finance team. So without further ado, it has been, or the recommendations A, B, C and D on page 7 have been moved. All those in favour, please. That's unanimous. Thank you very much indeed. Now move to item 7, which is the design code supplementary planning document. And if I could ask Councillor Upson, could you please present the report?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Happy to do so. The Levelling Up and Regeneration Act of 2023 requires every local planning authority to produce a design code for their area. And the National Planning Policy Framework, or the NPPF, states that they should be produced either as part of the local plan or as a supplementary planning document, or SPD. We've chosen to produce a supplementary planning document. There's also a requirement that the design code should reflect local architectural character and design preferences. We received a significant financial support from the government to help us prepare our design code, and about a year ago we appointed a specialist architectural consultant with a proven track record of preparing these design codes to help us prepare ours. It's also had many hours of scrutiny by our cross-party local development forum over the last year. Several workshops with designers and developers have been held, and some testing of the draft by our own planning officers. The intention is that this Rushcliffe Design Code SPD will replace the existing somewhat outdated design code of 2009 with a more user-friendly, NPPF compliant, borough-wide online version, and that when adopted it will provide a set of design rules which will form a material considerations in the determination of relevant planning application. The draft design code has had 6 weeks of public consultation, which understandably, I think, on such a large piece of work, resulted in several revisions, and a revised final draft code is at Appendix 1 of the report. That said, this is a major detailed document, and I have no doubt that once it is put into practice, there will be the need for further, hopefully minor revisions as we move forward. The underlying concept of this design code is that it provides greater certainty for applicants as to the council's expectations for design quality. I accept design is very subjective, but there is a widely held view, I think, that over the past 20 years or more, many of our new developments have not always created what I would call well-designed and sustainable places to live. It is subjective, I agree. But the basic structure of the new code is a list of mandatory requirements or rules that must be complied with, which can be filtered by application type and the actual area that the proposed development is in within the borough of Rushcliffe. Each rule then links to further explanatory guidance. And there is that difference between thou shalt comply with the rule and this is the guidance we recommend you follow. And there are, I would say, some very user-friendly illustrations within the suite of the 8 design notes. So a combination really of design rules and guidance. I chaired a meeting of the Cross-Party Local Development Forum on the 21st of May last month, and subject to some limited additional changes, the revisions to the document were supported, and it was recommended to bring it to this meeting this evening to Cabinet with the draft revised design code SPD and a recommendation for its adoption. So in conclusion, I've got some thanks really on this long, rather complicated piece of work that has involved many people. I'd like to thank particularly Harper Parry Architects for their technical expertise and especially I think for the use of friendly illustrations and use of plain English throughout this design guide. Emma Fawcett of this council, or rather she's left recently, but she did project manage this incredibly complex piece of work, and I thank her for that. And also the Local Development Forum for the many hours of scrutiny and suggestions that they made. And latterly, but not least, Richard Mapletop for his, I think, patience and his rigorous overview of this project. But I'd like to conclude there and propose the recommendations set out in section 2 of the report. They're quite brief, so I think I will read them, Chairman, with your agreement. It's recommended that Cabinet A, support the proposed revisions to the Rushcliffe Design Code supplementary planning document, as I referred to in Appendix 1. That we delegate the authority to the Director of Development and Economic Development sitting on my left to adopt this design code SPD and to publish an adoption statement at the point of the actual adoption. And C, delegates authority to the Director of Development and Economic Growth in consultation with the Cabinet Member for Portfolio Holder for Planning and Housing, myself, to make any necessary final textual, graphical and presentational changes that may be required prior to adoption that crop up. So that really is it, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Second, Councillor Brennan.
Chairman. Well, that was a very comprehensive resume, so I won't repeat it, but this has been a long time in coming, as Councillor Upton has said. It's had extensive consultation, and I think it's a really commendable document. As Councillor Upton said, it's very accessible, it's easily readable, and it's really well presented in my view. Makes it very user friendly for the applicant to identify the relevant areas for whatever development they're wishing to bring forward, and that's not something you can say about every planning document that you read. So I think that's exceptionally well done. I think we've all seen estates popping up on the edges of many of our settlements, which quite frankly bear very little, if any, nod to the existing architecture and type and scale of the communities against which they're being built. And I think whilst this is a long and complicated document, it gives us a starting point. It demonstrates our ambition that developments in the future of Rushcliffe should be of a very high standard, that they should reflect the communities alongside which they're being built, and that they should produce great living spaces for our residents. And that's not always been the case in the past. So while there will be some elements of this that people still won't necessarily agree with or like, and it is a living document, so we can move forward with it, I think it gives us a fantastic start to make sure that developments that come forward in the future really do fit in with our communities and belong to our communities and reflect the type of local area in which they're being built, which clearly hasn't been the case in some instances in the past. So I'm extremely pleased to see this. I know it's been a huge effort by everybody involved. I think it's well worth it, and I very much hope that it will have an impact on the quality and design of the settlements and developments that come forward. architecture of Rushcliffe. So I'm very pleased to second this and recommendations to council.
Thank you very much indeed. Any questions or comments? It is a very important document because, as both the speakers have said, it does help to ensure that the standard of design remains good in the borough, and it's important that we do reflect good design in the developments that we approve. So if there are no other questions or comments, then it has been moved and seconded. All those in favour? Unanimous. Thank you. We move to item 8, and before I present this, I'm just going to mention an alteration in the recommendation. It's not a massive alteration, it's just that the usual practice of having some delegated authority has been missed off the recommendations. So if I just say to you now, well, first of all, rather than adopts, we replace the first word adopts with endorses, because this isn't a policy, it's a good practice guide, and therefore to endorse the guide. And then secondly, to add at the end of recommendation A, and gives delegated authority to the Director for Development and Economic Growth to make updates in line with excuse me, in line with the core principles of the guide. So that's a fairly sort of standard phraseology that's included in recommendations. So I'll just repeat that. And gives delegated authority to the Director for Development and Economic Growth to make updates in line with the core principles of the guide. This is basically a result of the item that went to scrutiny, to the Growth and Development Scrutiny Group, relating to management of open spaces. There was a very detailed and comprehensive debate took place at that scrutiny group, and these recommendations are a result of those discussions. And the addition of onto the recommendation does allow for any minor changes as it states, should they occur, because basically it's meant to be a living document and therefore it can be sort of in the future. So it's just I remind you of the reasons for the guide is that the Cabinet decided not to adopt open space as a new development because, of course, it was going to create considerable financial burden to this council. Since 2011, the open spaces have been the responsibility of the developer, and that can continue. But obviously various concerns have been raised as to how the management of open spaces takes place. In some cases, other items being added onto the bills that residents receive. So I did actually have host a round table a year ago with residents, cross-party councillors and representatives from housing developers and the management companies. So that was a good opportunity to have a good discussion, and as a result of that I did write letters to both the Secretary of State for Housing and Communities, or then Secretary of State for Housing, Communities and Local Government, and that's since been passed on to the Parliamentary Under Secretary of State at the Housing and Communities and Local Government Department, and I in conversation with them, and I've already had a discussion with the Under Secretary of State, and I shall be arranging, as it says in the report, a further meeting is going to be arranged with the officials in order to progress it. Just to highlight that the good practice has 4 themes. So that's service, fairness, transparency and community. And the conversations that will take place with government, the aim is to highlight the issues that relate to the management of open spaces and the concerns that residents have, and also to acknowledge that sometimes there are additional items that are included. And so this guide is to clarify that the items that should be included, and by inference then the items that shouldn't. And that's to have a discussion with the government also to talk about the possibility of regulation of the industry that relates to management of open spaces. This guide, I think, is a very good start to that process of ensuring that good practice is maintained in the management of open spaces, and in order to reassure residents that we understand and we acknowledge their concerns, that we want to continue those discussions with government to ensure that good practice does prevail, with the potential of regulation of the industry should it be necessary. So the recommendations on page 199, paragraph 2, are, as I set out earlier, the altered recommendation to endorse the practice guide and to add that extra about giving the delegated authority, and then B is as it stands. So I will formally move that those 2 recommendations and ask for a seconder, Councillor Upson.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll just say a few things, if I may, around the topic. Some are obvious and some may not be. I would highlight it's a national issue. This isn't just pertinent to Rushcliffe Borough. It's a national issue, and in a way, I'm pleased that we're at the forefront of trying to come up with a guide, design, code of practice, or whatever will come hopefully in the future from Parliament. But until there is some national regulation of this sector, as I say, we've developed this good practice guide, and it is a guide. It's advisory, I would say. It's not legally enforceable, but it's better than having nothing. And so I'm pleased that we've got to this point in this issue. But a small little bit of history, really. In my early years, I was involved with estate layout design. Thankfully, not that long, but I learned a bit rapidly back in the 70s. And I suppose until the 1960s, 1970s, housing developments were typically on a gridiron pattern, that they were straight roads invariably. The plot was at right angles to the adopted road. You had a front garden, a back garden, if you're lucky, a drive and a garage, and that was it. And they just built them row upon row, advantages and disadvantages of that. I would suggest that there were very little, if any, community common areas, maybe the odd park that the council may take over or not, but by and large, you see them all around urban areas, do you not? But in the last 40 to 50 years, for whatever reasons, probably the need to use land more density, I guess, of developments, because they ain't making land anymore. And so the design of layouts changed, I would suggest, radically for a number of reasons. As I say, even in the old days, so to speak, you put your top water or your rainwater into a surface water sewer. You don't anymore. You have attenuation ponds and soakaways and all the nice bits and bobs of common areas. And some of them work, in my experience, some of them don't. Some of them are equitable and some aren't. I go dog walking on common open areas that residents are paying for. I enjoy the pleasure. I enjoy it for free. And I can understand them saying, well, why are we paying for Councillor Upton to walk across it and enjoy it at no cost to himself? So, I mean, there's that argument, and there are other arguments all around it. It's a start. And I hope the government picks up the challenge that we've thrown down. And I hope the developers get on board with this good practice guide which we've produced. I think it's very user friendly, it's simple, it's easy to read. And I think from my own perspective, I would like housing developers to and solicitors that when you purchase a new home on this type of development, you are given a copy. So as you've got something to read, because I, in my younger years, in my ignorance and with no advice from my solicitor, bought a house on a estate with common parts. And before I knew it, the month was out, I was told, oh, you've purchased 3 shares in the XYZ management company. It'll have an AGM every year. You're invited to it. And by the way, this is the first year's fee, and it grew every year. You can understand why I left. But not everybody can do that. And so I would hope that this guide is wide publicity, as wide as we can give it, that it is made available to hopefully all new purchases on new housing estates in Rushcliffe. I could go on, but I'll stop there, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed for that valuable history lesson. I'll just emphasise one point, just to clarify, that I didn't mention in my earlier remarks. This is specifically in relation to freehold property as opposed to leasehold. I think perhaps sometimes people conflate the two, and there's been an immense amount of publicity about leasehold, and that usually, not always, but tends to towards blocks of flats, etc., which cause different legal issues. But this is about the freehold element of housing development, and that is why it usually tends to include individual houses rather than blocks of apartments. Any comments, questions, Councillor Wheeler?
Yeah, thank you. And I think, look at the guide, it's really claimed, which is what we really want to see in terms of making it clear to residents. It's worth saying that open spaces and management companies have been around for many, many years. There's areas in myself and Councillor Verdes which were, space areas in the management companies, and we haven't seen any kind of issues, top of any issues you see elsewhere. So what has seemed to happen in recent years, residents on some of the new estates, is just feel the communication's not there from these developers who are opening the open spaces, they're not sure their rights, and that's what's causing confusion and again, like I say, some resentment as Sutton has touched upon. So hopefully the guide will encourage the developers not only to look at how they're doing their space, but also communication with residents to avoid confusion and try to make sure that it's positive in terms of moving to an area in the open space that there, because you see after a few years did it really take shape. Obviously when people first move in, they might not expect to look like the brochure. We do know it takes a while to mature. I know our residents moving to Lime Park, where again there wasn't a tree, there's just a puddle there in terms of where the balancing ponds, and now look, it's very mature and looks fantastic, but that takes 25-30 years to get there. So hopefully by openness and to communicate with residents, we'll avoid issues going forwards. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Brennan.
Thank you. Just briefly, I think to reiterate the point about working with developers and management companies, which we are asking officers to do. As chair of the Fareham Growth Board, we have already started this conversation with developers on the new Fareham site, and they have been very responsive and happy to work with us in terms of providing information to people coming onto the site. So I hope that portends well for discussions with other developers similarly. I think it's a great guide. As you say, it's in plain English, it's very clear. I think it's a really good step forward. I think it's a great initiative that we've taken, and I very much look forward to hearing feedback from officers about the willingness and enthusiasm of developers and management companies to engage with the process.
Just to emphasise, I think this is an ongoing process, and I'm quite sure that things will develop, but we need to be obviously reacting to any different developments that take place. Any other questions or comments? No. So it has been moved, the altered recommendation being moved and seconded. All those in favour, please. Still unanimous. Thank you very much indeed. That's the last item on the agenda. So with that, thank you for your attendance and I'll declare